The beginnings of CISV were on the 11th of August in 1946 in New York City when I was there at the Child Education Foundation, which was a foundation dedicated to the training of nursery and primary school children. This in 1946 was just after the World War, and that was a horrendous experience to go through, just to experience that human beings could treat one another in that way. And perhaps it's interesting that on this particular Sunday I was alone and undistracted thereby. I took the New York Times under my arm and went down to the East River and sat in Schultz Park. There on this park bench I looked at the river, which in a sense is a universal element, this water flowing. It's almost hypnotic to sit and watch water flow, and I have thought as I've remembered this experience, possibly that it was a sensitizing experience just to be there. So I sat. But I had the New York Times, of course, and I reached for the magazine section, pulled it out, and turned to an article. It was by Alexander Michaeljean, who spoke eloquently and who wrote eloquently. I read his article on a proposal for the United Nations Institute or University, where graduate students, the cream of students in philosophy, history, political science, law, etc., could get together and talk things out and really arrive at some conclusions that would help the world hold together. And I became actually angry because it was such a provocative thought, and that I was so much in that 1946 year aware of the wastefulness of World War II that I was open to suggestions for anything that would help the world evolve to a better state. Here was a suggestion of thinking that we were going to arrive at this better state through work with adults. I knew from my work with children, and I also had a background of work in psychology with adults, but I knew that you have to start with the children to get a certain product of adult. And if we wanted a world that was not a World War II kind of society, we would have to start with the children. And that's why I was angry, that perhaps the idea would take hold, and we would spend so much time, so much money, so much effort at the adult level, when actually the crux of the matter is at the child level. As the poet has said, the child is the father of man. And so I walked away and went back to the Child Education Foundation and sat down in the reception room there at the typewriter and wrote out some ideas. Not long. I went upstairs and I went to sleep. I was exhausted. So that's the way it started, on a park bench on the 11th of August, a concept which I think was really big enough to embrace my whole self. It embraced my whole background of my growing up as a child in that setting that I had, and my studies from chemistry to biology to psychology.
Just 3 weeks later, Doris took her concept to the national meeting of the American Psychological Association, where she strategically approached leading social psychologists with her idea of bringing children together from different countries to make friends at a time before their prejudices were firmly set. She asked them, "What shall I do with it?" She proactively spoke from the floor of the conference, where immediately a speaker from the State Department picked up on her idea and referred to it from the podium. At this point in time, 1946, Doris was 44 and living and working in Cincinnati. She had earned a Ph.D. in psychology from the University of Michigan and degrees in chemistry and biology from the University of Maine, in addition to postgraduate work in Berlin. She had grown up in Old Town, Maine, the third daughter of a small-town doctor and his wife, and she had the experience of living already through 2 world wars. In 1946, she was director and founder of the Department of Psychological Services at Cincinnati Children's Hospital and the Children's Convalescent Home. Her busy professional life included serving as chief psychologist at Cincinnati's Longview State Hospital. She was married to Erastus, or Rusty, Allen, and the mother of 7-year-old Rusty. The family lived in Glendale, Ohio, in a beautiful, stately home in a charming northern suburb of Cincinnati, where 3 months after the inception of the CISV idea, something pivotal occurred. Young Rusty burst into the house to inexplicably inquire of his mother, "There won't be any more wars, will there, Mother?" Her son's question and her response cemented her resolve to move her idea forward. So how did Doris take her big idea to the next level? It took 5 years of dogged effort to bring Doris's germ of an idea to reality. Rusty was a patent and trademark attorney for Procter & Gamble and fully committed to the project from the beginning. While Europe was where Doris and Rusty imagined holding their first Children's International Summer Village, it became clear by 1949 that what was needed to pull this idea together was in Cincinnati. It was in Cincinnati that they found movers and shakers stirred by Doris's idealistic plan who pledged to help. While Doris worked at the national and international levels, garnering support from professional colleagues, appealing to and getting involved with UNESCO, and making connections in various countries, Rusty headed up the fundraising team and brought influential citizens to the table, including several very strong women, and Oliver Gale, the public relations director for Procter & Gamble, the CEO of the strongest broadcast network in the nation, WLW, located in Cincinnati, also pledged his support. Rusty incorporated Children's International Summer Villages as a nonprofit organization in Ohio in March 1950 to give it the official legal status required for raising funds as well as its profile. Just think about all that had to be resolved for the first village in the fledgling organization. Monthly planning meetings were held beginning fall 1949 to address all the details. 1. The program, facility, and staffing of the village, as well as child selection guidelines and communication with 9 countries. 2. The structure of the adult meeting to be held simultaneously with the village. Unlike today's villages, the adults from all the participating countries would convene at a separate location and work together on how CISV as an organization would operate going forward. 3. The plans for research at the village and thereafter. 4. Public relations, garnering support for the concept of CISV and for many types of assistance with the village program were critical, as was a logo and publicity worthy of national and international attention. And 5. How to pay for everything. Certain that once started the plan would carry itself, the Allens made up the considerable lack of funds from their own bank account. Imagine their elation when Doris and Rusty finally met the European delegates when they arrived via charter plane in New York City on June 2, 1951. Imagine their excitement on the first open day at St. Edmunds in Glendale when the 55 delegates from 9 nations wore their new CISV t-shirts imprinted with the newly designed CISV logo. Imagine their emotion when the CISV song was written, put to music, and first sung, all within 24 hours. Imagine their pride at seeing the CISV idea at work in spite of all the naysayers.
When the plan was conceived in 1946, many people told us that such a camp was impossible. Parents would never let their children go so far away, or if they did, the children themselves would be homesick and would fail to adapt. It would not be possible to run a camp in which there would be no common language. Children would stay in their own tight little national groups and no common experience would be developed. The Cincinnati experience demonstrated clearly that these fears were ill-founded. The tears and clinging sobs as the European children parted from the Cincinnati and Mexican children to go to New York and their overseas plane were undeniable evidence of those close ties that had been formed among these young delegates from 9 countries. We took children old enough to have the stamp of their culture, but young enough to be flexible and educatable. Their prejudices are not too firmly formed at the age of 11.
Scientific research was an integral part of the development of CISV and the early villages and deserves to be mentioned. Doris felt that CISV was the first program for peace built on science. Her knowledge of child development and human dynamics shaped CISV. Psychological assessments were conducted of all the children as they arrived, and again at camp's end. The tests were designed to provide an indication of how a month of living amongst mixed races, religions, and nationalities would affect the participants. A 1955 New York Times Magazine article on a CISV village focused on such anecdotes as these. A young German announced this discovery: "We are not the only cultured people. Others too have culture, and we can be friends." And from an American boy, "I always thought Negroes are different and not as good as us. Now I've lived with them and don't think any more about who is black and who is white." In a nutshell, this is how Children's International Summer Villages came to life. 10 years after the birth of the CISV idea, in July of 1956, Dr. Allen delivered the opening address at the first International Conference of CISV. It was held in Frostavallen, Sweden, where a CISV village was also underway. The recognizable photo from the cover of Bill Matthews' Here in This Village was taken at Frostavallen. Listen to this excerpt of Doris's eloquent words. Her philosophy, her passion, her idealism and resolve challenge us as much today as they did in Sweden in 1956.
The idea for CISV came just 10 years ago. It took 5 years of work to prepare the first village in Cincinnati in 1951. France followed with a village in 1952, Sweden in 1953. By the end of these 6 summers, we shall have held 13 villages in 7 different countries. 30 countries will have participated. It's important that we at the conference build a strong organization structure because we need not 3, but 30 villages in 1 year. We need not 30, but 100 villages in a year. We should plan boldly for 200 years. We should build soundly upon science. We should indeed contribute to the science of international relations. This is the program of CISV. We are a group of people who view the world as a whole and not as a collection of parts. We see this wholeness at a time when our newspapers are reporting a world divided into East and West, North Atlantic states, Asiatic states, a Pan-American Union, a Mediterranean bloc. Day by day come new divisions. How is it that we in Children's International Summer Villages can look at the world as one, that is, as whole? We can do this because we know that basically human beings are very much alike. Human beings everywhere desire some form of possessions or privileges. We and all human beings have feelings for home and family, feelings for our professions, our work, and our play. We as human beings everywhere have feelings of success and joy, and feelings of disappointment and sadness. Human beings everywhere wish to belong to some groups, wish to be accepted, and with affection. Because human beings are really so much alike, we know that it is possible to speak directly from one human being to another and be understood and to be friends. We in Children's International Summer Villages know that with practice, one can cut through thousands of years of differences in history. And we know that one can cut through layer upon layer of differences in cultures and more, and speak to the human beings behind those differences. We know that underneath differences of dress, of manner and language, religion, political thought, and habits of action, is a human being who is very much like other human beings. In Cincinnati, we eat applesauce on meat. Here, we eat applesauce on cereal. In Cincinnati, we say thank you before we eat. Here, we say thank you after we eat. We of this conference are from 15 countries, and we represent 12 different languages, yet we discover that behind the sounds, we are saying many of the same ideas. We are bound together by more than a point of view, by more than a way of looking at the world and the people. We in Children's Cincinnati Summer Villages are united by an action program. Let us look at the symbol of CISV. These children in the emblem are active. They're holding hands.
Doris Allen believed that CISV is a practical program. Quite simply, we bring children together from many countries. In 2014, it is still a really great idea.